So let's just be honest for a second. When you hear the word mucus, most of us, well, we think snot, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's that stuff from a cold, something you just want gone, maybe even find a bit unpleasant.
Definitely unpleasant
And
sometimes.
you know, that gut reaction, that's exactly why diving into this topic is so interesting. Because what if that seemingly simple, kind of gross stuff is actually, well, a biological masterpiece?
A masterpiece. Okay, mucus. You've got my attention.
Absolutely. Something vital for your health, for your survival, really.
Right. So we're taking the material you shared, all that research, and we're going deep into this hidden world of mucus. The mission today is to unpack the science, figure out why it's so important, way beyond just a runny nose.
Precisely. And we're not just talking about your nose. Mucus is everywhere. It coats your airways, your entire digestive system.
Top to bottom.
Top to bottom, yeah. And other body cavities, too. It's this constant frontline defense, a really critical player.
Okay, frontline player. Let's break it down then. If it's a masterpiece, what's it made of? What are the fundamentals?
So the absolute stars of the show are these large molecules called mucins. They're glycoproteins. Think of them as the structural core.
Glycoproteins.
And they're not all the same. Some are actually anchored, like tethered to the surface of your cells.
Part of the lining.
Yeah, forming a kind of fixed layer. Others are secreted, pushed out by specialized cells.
Ah, like those goblet cells. I remember reading about them. They look like little wine glasses spilling out goo.
That's them. Goblet cells are the main factories for the secreted kind. But here's the thing. While mucins give mucus its structure, most of it, like over 95%, is just water.
95% water, really?
Yep. But it's not just water and mucins. There are lipids, salts, bits of DNA floating around, and crucially, a whole arsenal of antimicrobial compounds, stuff designed to fight off invaders.
So it's like a loaded weapon, chemically speaking, suspended in water and gel.
In a way, yeah. It's a very complex mix.
Okay, let's visualize those mucins. You said they're big protein polymers, but what do they actually look like up close?
Imagine a long protein chain, like a backbone. But it's absolutely covered in these long sugar molecules sticking out. We call those glycans.
Sugars attached to the protein.
Exactly.
Yep.
Hundreds of them sometimes. It gives the whole molecule this bristly appearance, often described as a bottle brush.
A bottle brush.
Uh-huh.
Huh, okay, I can picture that. Stiff backbone, fuzzy sugar bristles all around.
You got it.
And is that bottle brush structure the same everywhere? Like, is lung mucus the same as gut mucus?
No, and that's absolutely critical. That's what the research really emphasizes. The structure, especially those sugar glycans, their type, how they're arranged, it varies hugely.
Depending on where it is.
Depending on where it is in the body and what specific job it needs to perform there. This incredible structural diversity is key to its many functions.
Functions that are way more complex than just being sticky, I take it.
Oh, absolutely. Let's get into some of those properties.
Please do. What makes this bottle brush structure work so well?
Okay, first, probably the most obvious one. It's a barrier, a physical shield, and a chemical trap, both.
How does that work?
Well, the mucin polymers tangle up and form this mesh network. Think of it like a net or a sieve.
Okay, filtering things out based on size.
Exactly. It has specific pore sizes, usually a few hundred nanometers across. So bigger things like bacteria or yeast cells, they physically just can't get through to the delicate cell surfaces underneath.
Makes sense.
But it's smarter than just size. It can also trap smaller particles, like viruses. It does this by binding to them. Specific sugars on the mucin bottle brush can latch onto proteins on the virus surface.
Ah, so it's not just passive filtering, it's actively grabbing certain things, like molecular Velcro.
Kind of. One source we looked at used a great analogy. It's like a bouncer at a club.
Huh, I like that.
Yeah, checking size, but also checking IDs, seeing if it binds, deciding who gets past the velvet rope.
Okay, that's a fantastic image. Barrier function, check. But you said it wasn't static.
Right. Its dynamicity is super important. It's not just a fixed gel. It's physical properties, like how thick or runny it is, its rheology can actually change.
On the fly, inside us.
Yes, in vivo. It fine-tunes itself based on things like mucin concentration, the local pH level, whether certain ions like calcium are present.
Calcium ions affect mucus?
They can, yeah. They can cross-link the mucins, make it thicker. And as we said, that specific glycan structure plays a huge role too. It allows the mucus to adapt its behavior based on what the tissue needs right then and there.
Wow. So it can get thicker or thinner depending on the situation. It's incredibly adaptive for a protective layer.
It really is.
And then there's the water. Over 95%, you said. So hydration must be key.
Absolutely crucial. Those sugar glycans, the bristles on the bottle brush, they are fantastic at attracting and holding on to water molecules through hydrogen bonding.
Why is that so important?
Well, first, it keeps the underlying cells, the mucosa, from drying out. That's vital. Second, it helps create that tangled, hydrated network structure that gives mucus its form and function. It's incredibly hygroscopic. It just loves water.
And all that water trapped around the mucins probably makes it slippery, right?
Yeah.
Like a good lubricant.
Exactly. It's an exceptionally effective lubricant because of that structure and hydration. Think about your esophagus when you swallow, or your joints, even your eyes. Mucus reduces friction, prevents wear and tear on delicate surfaces.
Better than, say, oil.
Some studies show it's comparable to, or even better than, some of the best synthetic lubricants we've engineered. Nature had a head start.
Clearly. Okay, so it's a barrier, it's dynamic, it hydrates, it lubricates. Is it just a physical thing, though? Or does it interact biologically?
Oh, it's much more than just a physical layer. It has bioactivity. Mucins aren't inert. They can directly interact with our own cells and also with the trillions of microbes living on and in us.
Interact how?
They can influence cell behavior, acting almost like signaling molecules in some contexts. It helps regulate biological processes. It's not just passively sitting there. It's part of the conversation.
A signaling matrix.
Yeah.
Fascinating. And then there are these terms you hear, viscoelastic, spinnable. What do those mean practically?
Right. Viscoelastic means it has properties of both a liquid viscosity, it can flow, and a solid elasticity. It can resist deformation and sort of snap back.
Like silly putty, maybe?
Sort of, yeah, a bit like that. And spinnability. That's its ability to be drawn out into long, thin threads or filaments without breaking.
Like when you have a cold.
Oh, hi.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly. And that property is really important. That combination of viscoelasticity and spinnability is key for things like mucociliary clearance.
That's the escalator thing in your lungs, right? Sweeping stuff out.
Precisely. The mucus needs to be sticky enough to trap particles, but also elastic and spinnable enough to be moved effectively by the cilia, those tiny hairs. It's also crucial for forming a cohesive food bolus when you swallow, helping it slide down smoothly.
So it's this incredibly sophisticated, multi-talented material, fine-tuned for all these different jobs. Amazing. But its roles go even further, don't they? Beyond just physical protection.
They absolutely do. And this is where it gets maybe even more surprising. One huge role, highlighted in the sources, is as an ecological niche. A habitat.
A habitat for what?
For our microbiomes. Those communities of bacteria, fungi, and other microbes that live in symbiosis with us, they live in the mucus.
Wait, in it. Not just near it or on it.
Right inside. Especially in places like the gut, there's often an outer, looser layer where microbes thrive, and an inner, more attached layer closer to our cells that's largely sterile. The mucus provides them a home, nutrients. It shapes the community.
Wow. So our slime is basically microbial real estate.
You could put it that way. And this isn't just a human thing, it's ancient. The sources mention that even simple animals like corals and jellyfish use mucus layers to manage their associated microbes.
Jellyfish manage their microbial tenants with slime.
Wow.
That's unexpected.
It is. Sometimes they use it to encourage beneficial bacteria, sometimes to shed unwanted ones. There's even this amazing example of a squid, Euprimna scolops. Its mucus doesn't just house bacteria, it actively selects its specific partner, a bioluminescent bacterium called Vibrio fischeri.
Selects it. How?
The mucus structure and chemistry seem to filter out almost everything else from the seawater, allowing only Vibrio fischeri to colonize the light organ. It's incredibly specific.
Mucus as a high-security gatekeeper for microbes. That's wild. Okay, beyond the microbiome, what other essential functions rely on mucus?
Well, things you might not immediately connect. It plays a role in your sense of smell-trapping odor molecules. It's critical in reproduction, both male and female, and obviously maintaining overall gut health. Oh, and a very practical point. It significantly impacts how drugs are absorbed.
Ah, because they have to get through that layer first.
Exactly. Whether you swallow a pill or inhale medication, it has to interact with and usually penetrate the mucus lining to reach your cells or bloodstream.
Makes total sense. Okay, so mucus is vital. But what happens when this masterpiece gets damaged?
Yeah.
Or when pathogens figure out how to beat it?
Well, that's the constant battle, isn't it? Pathogens are always evolving ways to get around our defenses, including mucus. A classic example is Helicobacter pylori.
The stomach ulcer bug.
That's the one. It actually secretes an enzyme, urease, that breaks down urea into ammonia. This neutralizes the stomach acid locally, but it also raises the pH of the gastric mucin around it.
And that does what?
It makes the mucus less viscous, more watery. So the bacteria can literally swim through it more easily to reach the stomach lining, where they cause damage.
It chemically melts its way through the barrier. Nasty.
Very effective, unfortunately. And beyond pathogen strategies, problems can arise when the mucus layer itself is altered. Changes in its thickness, its permeability, its charge, or those crucial sugar decorations, the glycosylation patterns.
Those changes are linked to diseases.
Directly. The sources connect altered mucus to a whole host of conditions, things like inflammatory bowel disease, IBD, including Crohn's disease. Cystic fibrosis is a classic example where mucus in the lungs and elsewhere becomes incredibly thick and sticky due to a genetic defect.
Clogging things up.
Exactly. Certain cancers, particularly mucinous tumors, actually overproduce mucus to create a physical shield, protecting themselves from immune cells and chemotherapy drugs.
Wow. Using mucus as armor.
It happens. Altered mucus is also implicated in infertility, endometriosis, even kidney disease. The point is, changes in mucus aren't just a side effect, they can be fundamental to the disease process itself.
That really drives home how central this layer is. Let's zoom in on a couple of examples from the sources. Allergic rhinitis, hay fever, everyone knows that means loads of mucus.
Right, and that excessive mucus, the hypersecretion from goblet cells in the airways, is a hallmark. But it's not just a simple reaction, it's driven by really complex neuroimmune regulation.
Nerves and immune cells talking to each other.
Yes, and sometimes getting their signals crossed. Nerve signals, for instance, can release acetylcholine, which directly tells goblet cells to pump out more mucus. Other signaling molecules are involved too, like neuraminidin U, influencing immune cells, which in turn affect mucus. There's even evidence of direct nerve-to-goblet cell chat.
So your own nervous system can basically trigger the mucus floodgates and allergies.
In a manner of speaking, yes. It's part of an exaggerated inflammatory response, and understanding these pathways opens up treatment possibilities.
How so?
Well, the sources mention treatments being explored that target this hypersecretion. Things like monoclonal antibodies to block specific immune signals, or drugs that interfere with nerve signaling, like anticholinergics, or even compounds that mess with the machinery inside the goblet cells that produces the mucins.
So trying to turn down the signal that's causing the overproduction. Interesting. What about infections, specifically fungal infections?
Mucus is definitely part of our defense against fungi like Candida albicans, a common yeast, but we're facing a growing problem with invasive candidiasis, especially from drug-resistant strains.
Like Candida auris.
Yeah.
The superbug one.
Exactly. That one, and also azole-resistant or echinocandin-resistant C. glabrata. These are tough infections where our natural defenses, including mucus, might be overwhelmed, and current drugs might not work well.
Highlighting the need for new antifungals.
Urgently. And the sources do mention some promising novel antifungal drugs currently in clinical trials.
What's different about them?
They have different mechanisms of action, potentially overcoming resistance. Some offer advantages like being available as pills instead of just IVs, having longer half-life so you need fewer doses, or being better at penetrating tricky sites like deep tissues or the central nervous system. They're aiming to fill gaps in our current arsenal against these really challenging fungal infections.
So new weapons for when the mucus shield isn't enough or the fungus is too aggressive?
Precisely. It really shows that ongoing arms race between host defenses and pathogens.
Okay, so mucus is critical for health, but its sheer complexity and effectiveness are also inspiring scientists and engineers. Let's shift gears to innovation. How is mucus sparking new ideas?
Well, it's not entirely new. People have recognized something special about it for ages. Ancient Greeks apparently used snail mucus on wounds.
Snail slime for cuts. Seriously.
Records suggest it. And in the 18th century, there are mentions of snail and slug mucus in cosmetics. More scientifically, there's older research, quite fascinating, showing that if you mixed certain bacteria with purified mucins and gave them to animals, it could actually make the bacteria more virulent, more likely to cause disease.
How? By protecting them.
That's the theory. Maybe giving them a slippery coating to evade the host's initial immune clearance. A bit counterintuitive, but it shows the power of these molecules.
Okay, so historical uses, some may be a bit dubious. What about modern high-tech applications? Mimicking mucus?
That's where it gets really exciting. Mucins themselves are being explored as advanced biomaterials, much like collagen or hyaluronic acid, which people might be more familiar with. Their unique properties, lubrication, hydration, barrier function, make them really attractive.
For medical uses?
Medical, chemical, absolutely. A huge area is drug delivery.
Ah, because of that interaction we talked about.
Exactly. Scientists are designing mucoadhesive systems materials that deliberately stick to our mucosal surfaces.
Why would you want that?
Well, imagine you want a drug to stay in a specific spot for longer, like in the eye or the nose, or you want to improve its absorption in the gut. Sticking it to the mucus can achieve that.
Targeted delivery.
Right. You can use mucins or materials inspired by them to create hydrogels. These are like jelly-like substances that can hold drugs and release them slowly over time. They're even making mucin-based nanoparticles to encapsulate and deliver things like therapeutic enzymes.
Tiny mucus-like packages delivering medicine right where it's needed.
Hmm.
Cool. What about cosmetics? You mentioned the 18th century.
Still a thing. Their amazing hygroscopic property holding onto water makes mucins great candidates for skin hydration products.
Like moisturizers.
Exactly. And yes, snail mucin cosmetics are quite popular again, though it's likely a combination of the mucus themselves and other goodies in the snail secretion minerals, peptides, vitamins.
More than just slime.
Probably. And researchers are even looking at mucins as potential dermal fillers,
Mm-hmm.
for wrinkles, because they seem to resist being broken down by enzymes in the body longer than some existing fillers like hyaluronic acid.
A natural, longer-lasting filler. Interesting. What about preventing things from sticking where they shouldn't, like bacteria on medical devices?
Another really promising avenue, using mucins to create protective coatings. Coat a catheter, an implant, maybe even a contact lens.
And it stops bacteria from latching on.
That's the idea. Studies show mucin coatings can significantly reduce the adhesion of nasty bacteria like Staph aureus, strep pneumonia, even Candida albicans, preventing biofilm formation, which is a huge problem in medicine. It could improve the biocompatibility of materials used inside the body, like vascular graft.
Making implants safer.
Potentially, yes. And people are even thinking about coating beneficial things like probiotic bacteria.
Giving the good bugs a protective mucus coat.
Sort of, like a little delivery shield to help them survive the journey through the stomach and get established in the gut.
A mucus battlesuit for probiotics. I love it.
It captures the idea. And even that fundamental property of mucins, how they rapidly hydrate and swell up when they're released from cells, that's inspiring new designs for smart materials. Things that could be injected compactly and then expand dramatically in place for tissue engineering or drug release.
So much potential. Are there specific research projects happening right now that really showcase this?
Oh, definitely. There's a really cool student project out of Johns Hopkins. They call themselves the Amino Artisans.
Catchy name. What are they doing?
They're trying to create synthetic snail mucus.
Synthetic. Why not just use the snails?
Well, two main reasons. One is ethical. The traditional methods for harvesting snail mucus, like stressing them out or using machines, aren't very kind to the snails.
Ah, okay. Animal welfare.
Right. But the other big driver is engineering. If you can make it synthetically, you have much more control. You can potentially tweak it, improve it, give it specific properties.
How are they making it?
They're focusing on one key protein found in snail mucus called epiphragmin. They're using molecular biology tools, DNA cloning, to basically program bacteria or yeast to produce this protein for them in bioreactors.
So brewing snail protein instead of farming snails.
Essentially, yes. They've gotten funding, they're presenting their work. The goal is applications in skincare, sure, but also potentially medical research. And the long-term vision is maybe even modifying that protein using mutagenesis to add new functions. Imagine a synthetic mucus that could specifically target cancer cells, for instance.
Wow. From snail slime to engineered therapeutics. That's a leap.
It's a great example of biomimicry pushing into bioengineering. It offers scalability and control that you just don't get from traditional extraction.
Definitely. What about just understanding the basic science better? Any cool tools being developed?
Yes. Another fascinating project, this one at Stanford. Researchers there have developed a really clever in vitro platform, basically, a lab setup to study the physics of intestinal mucus.
Gut mucus physics. In a dish.
Exactly. Instead of relying only on animal models, which can be complex, expensive, and, frankly, unpleasant, they grow intestinal cells that produce mucus right there on a culture plate. They expose them to air, which encourages a nice, thick mucus layer to form, just like in the gut.
Okay, so they have living mucus in a dish. How do they measure its properties, like thickness or stickiness, without messing it up?
That's the ingenious part. They use a tiny magnetic wire, like a microscopic stir bar almost. They gently place it on the mucus surface. Then they apply a controlled magnetic field, which pulls the wire. By precisely measuring how the wire moves, how fast, how far it bounces back, they can calculate the mucus's viscosity, its elasticity, all those key physical properties.
Without poking it or scraping it, just using magnets.
Exactly. It's non-invasive for the living mucus layer and the cells underneath. It gives them a way to really quantify the material properties in a controlled environment.
That is incredibly clever. What can they do with that?
Well, they've already used it to see how the mucus changes when they simulate a parasitic worm infection, for example. It gives them a tool to study how pathogens interact with mucus or how potential drugs might affect mucus properties.
So you could test drugs to see if they make mucus healthier, maybe.
Precisely. They're applying similar techniques to study airway mucus in models of cystic fibrosis and asthma, and they're collaborating with other groups to use this platform to screen for compounds that could help restore normal, healthy mucus function in those diseases.
It's like giving researchers a much clearer, more accessible window into this really complex, dynamic material.
It really is a fantastic example of how developing innovative tools can accelerate our fundamental understanding, which is what ultimately leads to new treatments.
Amazing stuff. You know, we started this thinking mucus was just snot. Pretty basic, maybe a little gross.
Right.
And we've ended up seeing it's this incredibly complex, dynamic, honestly elegant biological material. A masterpiece, like you said at the start.
It really is, from being a precisely tailored barrier to acting as this crucial habitat for our microbiomes.
Yeah, the microbial real estate.
Exactly, to its roles in things we don't even think about, like smell or how food slides down. It's just fundamental to health.
And we saw how when it goes wrong, when that layer is altered, it's linked to so many serious diseases. It's not just a symptom, it's often part of the problem.
Absolutely. It underscores how vital maintaining that healthy mucus layer really is.
But what's really struck me is how this ancient evolved substance is now driving cutting-edge science and technology.
Right, from inspiring new ways to deliver drugs or formulating cosmetics.
To actually building synthetic versions in the lab or inventing entirely new ways, like with magnetic wires, just to study its physics.
It shows there's still so much depth, so much hidden complexity and potential in something that seems utterly commonplace.
It really does. Which leaves me with a final thought, something for you, our listener, to maybe ponder. Mucus has been part of us, part of life, for literally millions of years. It's inside us right now doing critical work.
Constantly, yeah.
So why is it? Why is something so fundamental, so ancient, so intimately part of us still such a frontier? Why does it still hold so many secrets and inspire such, frankly, surprising innovation that we're really only just beginning to grasp and engineer today?